Blastpop here. I am looking at Scenario 9, Back to Russia, from Fighting Formations, Großdeutschland Division. This is a smallish scenario that uses approximately a half a map in terms of game space. So it's conveniently small, and for the purposes of my discussion here, it's almost ideal in size. Now I'm looking at this from a solitaire perspective, and there are hidden units and roadblocks, and some of the units are just ghosts, so to speak, and basically a false sighting. And also there's a couple other units that are on the map without a sighting marker. Now, this scenario takes place in March of 1943, and the Soviets are retreating and the Germans are entering the board from more than one direction. So the initial German forces that start the game are a couple of Stug platoons, and over here a couple of Grenadier platoons, an MG-34 platoon, and another Grenadier. So what they need to do in this scenario is capture all three of the victory condition hexes, which are the ones in red, which are here, here, and here. In their way are the various Soviet forces. Now, the backside of these sighting markers correspond, in most cases, to one of six of these forces that are on these corresponding markers. So if I flip over a marker and it says A, the A forces would be represented there. Additionally, the Soviets have a 76mm crash boom, which will be placed at their convenience and firing at the Germans wherever they want to place the piece once the Germans moving, or I believe is firing. So they have the opportunity to ambush. Now the key to this game is this order matrix, and the 2 3s and the 2 7s that are on this side of the track were the preceded numbers. I rolled the dice for the remaining 6, and these are the markers that came up, or the locations from which to choose orders. This is a 5-turn scenario unless it goes into overtime, although it starts on turn track 9. When the scenario gets to sudden death, you roll the die, 2 20-sided dice, and if you roll less than 13, the scenario ends. Otherwise it goes to another turn until you trigger the victory conditions. So for the Germans, it looks to me that they want a longer scenario. The Soviets want to hasten its ending as quickly as possible. On the second turn, you get German reinforcements, a command counter, a Grenadier, a second Grenadier, and some not Sturmgeschützes, but Hinnemogs, or the mini Hinnemogs, which I call them. Yes, SDKFZ 250s. A couple turns later, and those ones will enter from these here will enter from the south side of the board, which is where the Germans are, right here. There's also a reconnaissance unit, VW reconnaissance. There's 3 squadrons, I guess, for lack of a better term, and they enter anywhere on the east edge of the board. So they can maybe do a flanking maneuver and work on possibly capturing this objective. But that's towards the end of the game. So, what I think, from a solitaire standpoint, I think the scenario won't work too badly because this represents the Soviet 40th Army, and they're in a retreating situation, they're disorganized. So, as far as the placement of forces, it's kind of going to be haphazard in any event. And honestly, I don't think it's going to be that difficult to rationalize what the Soviets would do. And this system may work with other scenarios. Also, in addition to the forces that I indicated earlier on those bigger counters, lettered A through H, there is also a roadblock, false sightings. So you're not quite sure what the German's not going to be sure what he's up against. Now, both sides initially get one card at random, and since for the start of the game, additional cards can be procured in their assets. Typically, when an 8, 9, or 10 are rolled for, and so the Germans. Let's see what we have here to start off for a card. Essentially, the Germans can conduct 2 consecutive aircraft barrages, which could be convenient once he figures out where the Soviets are, or he can actually attempt to attack a sighting and see if, in fact, there's anything there or not. So it could be used as a reconnaissance force. So that's not too bad. And that was randomly drawn. The Soviet has also a randomly drawn asset deck card, but I won't reveal that at this point to help preserve at least some of the surprise for this scenario. So the German has some interesting but small forces. They need to advance their way across the board and capture those objectives and do it in an expeditious manner. So they really need to move quickly and use all the assets that they have available to them. So I don't think this is a cakewalk scenario. Now this occurs in winter, so these fields here aren't really here, they're more like stubble. So they modify hindrances, for those who know this game, to a level of 2 instead of the normal 3. But yet they still give the Germans some cover to advance. Now I could set up the German forces here, anywhere on the south side of the board, but I also wanted to make it easier for the German infantry to advance by using the roads. It's less critical for tracked units. And on top of that, I didn't really want to overstack people too much in an effort to get down the road, because if the Soviet places his anti-tank gun or has artillery or air assets during the course of the game, I didn't want these guys to be sitting targets. So this gives you an indication of what this scenario looks like in terms of forces available and gameplay. Oh, one other point that I should mention is the Soviets do receive a entrenchment, which is this hex counter here. It helps in the defense, and is kind of one way that they can potentially defend this hex with forces. Ultimately, it's probably the best place to place it, because I don't necessarily want to, as a Soviet, I wouldn't want to concede that for the German forces that come on with the reconnaissance forces on the 4th turn. So it's going to be an interesting scenario, and I hope this gives you a sense of some of the possibilities that fighting formations gives you, and hopefully it will inspire a few of you who don't have face-to-face opponents to give this game a try in a solitaire mode. Despite hidden forces, there's some easy workarounds that are not necessarily unrealistic or ahistorical. So it gives you a sense of the scenario. what the options are, the strategies, the solitaire possibilities, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe and like it if you did in fact find this useful for your gaming needs. This has been Blastpop. Bye.